Antoons is a man you've probably heard of, whether you're one of his 1.06 million subscribers or you've seen one of the many videos discussing him. If you haven't, allow me to give a short summary. Antoons, real name Anton Servetnik, is a 33-year-old Estonian man who describes his channel as containing the dark side of animation, but we'll get back to that soon. Anton is most famous for his deathbed videos, of which there are 11 of at the time of writing, the most popular of which being Sonic's Deathbed, which has over 70 million views. Now, while in my opinion, these videos are pretty cringe, I can see why people enjoy them. Not to mention, he's been on YouTube for a while, with his first available video uploaded around 6 years ago. He's also an on-and-off game developer, developing one game at the moment called Pill Fighter, which is important a little bit later. Unironically, looks like a decent game though. Just taking a look at his channel, there's nothing too much of note, but his Twitter is a different story. Also, if you notice Antoons' Twitter handle changing throughout this video, for those who don't know, Antoons has a history of getting suspended and then ban evading, as well as having all accounts, neither of which I have a problem with, by the way. There'll be a couple of videos I'll be using as sources, which will obviously be somewhat abridged, so I do implore you to watch the originals, if not for any other reason that they are really good videos. Also, don't think I'm some kind of like extreme leftist who despises all edgy jokes and right-leaning people. If you're new, you probably won't know that in the past I've been extremely critical of the leftist streamers and what I'm trying to say is I'm not going to be criticizing Anton because of my political beliefs, which I will try and keep out of this video, but rather because I just don't think he's a very nice person. I know a lot of my community is on Anton's side, so as always, all I ask is for you to hear me out and feel free to disagree. Anyway, Antoons decided to start pushing the boundaries of free speech with his webcomics, but we'll discuss them a bit more soon. In this video, I'm going to attempt to give a timeline of Antoons' journey since Daft Pina's video from 6 months ago, how his behaviour went from mild to genuinely hateful, how he's taken everything further and further since then, and how at this point, Antoons is beyond redemption.
Antoons still exists, and I know to many of you that's a disgusting notion that you wish was never announced.
Today I want to discuss Antoons drawing literal porn of me.
Well, it's a joke, obviously. It's a joke. He's gone.
Hold on. Do you agree with any of those statements?
If you're thinking that black-colored characters are the only people who date black women and wear hip-hop-like clothing, what do you think that says about how you view black people?
But I still believe that tracing leads to art degradation, and while this was happening, Anton met two other comic creators, Stone Toss and Mr. Pumpkinface.
So Antoons copyright striked my video and made a bunch of false accusations against me.
He then further elaborated when I asked him about it in our interview, saying, "I was told she defends all LGBT groups, which includes MAPS."
It's like normal.
It's not normal.
Antoons started his downward spiral when he started making political comics similar to that of Stone Toss, at first focusing on satirizing the 2020 Black Lives Matter protests. Now, I don't have a strong opinion on Stone Toss personally, although I do disagree with some of his opinions, but tell what you want about him, as far as I'm aware he hasn't got as far as Antoons, who tends to go a bit far in his pursuit of comedy. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm 100% for free speech, but in my opinion, going after a black trans minor for just that is a little bit too far, and that's where Puppy Chan comes in. Puppy Chan is a semi-popular Twitter artist who happens to be autistic, black, non-binary, and left-leaning, or, as you'll soon come to find out, a perfect target for Antoons. Another situation has been talked about a lot, but it's very important to the story and to get the full picture of what Antoons is like, so bear with me if you've heard it like a million times. If you haven't, another YouTuber just made a more comprehensive video on it, which is where I've gotten most of the information. Bear in mind, important story detail, Puppy Chan was 17 at this time. The Twitter drama started off when Puppy Chan quote tweeted a response to someone from Antoons. I don't have the context of where he was responding to, but he seemed somewhat hostile. Puppy Chan basically defended this person, causing Anton to bring up a comic where they drew a trans person having a fairly nice interaction with their dying grandpa, which Antoons responds to by calling it a fantasy world. Puppy Chan argues back, escalating the situation a bit more before saying they're a bit more hostile due to being on their period. Antoons, though, remember, over 30-year-old man, decides to respond to this by asking the 17-year-old about their period, more specifically asking were you not born biologically male, and circling the tweet and where they say it.
Don't ask anyone about the genitals. I didn't think I had to, say that specifically.
I'm not gonna lie, it's a bit dodgy, but it's unlikely he was being intentionally creepy. I'm just assuming he got caught up in the argument and said some dumb shit. We've all been there. Most people assume Antoons took the comic picture of a trans woman and her grandpa, and he assumed it was like a self-insert, but again, that's just an assumption, because while now they have trans boy in their bio, which would mean they weren't born biologically male anyway, they didn't while all of this was going down. I do think some people blew this out of proportion, especially calling him Predator. I'm definitely not saying he should have said it, but still, although to be fair, some of his actions towards minors who dislike him later kind of put the situation into a bit more perspective, although again, that's for later. Anyway, this whole drama gave Anton an idea for his game, Pillfire. Allow me to give a quick rundown. Pillfire is a fairly conventional fighting game with the playable characters and bosses being Twitterized with somewhat vocal political views, red-pilled and blue-pilled. Antoons decided, you know, it'd be funny adding Puppy-chan into this game as a boss, with one of their attacks consisting of shooting period blood. It's not graphic as their crotch is censored with black bar, but Puppy-chan was mortified and felt humiliated by it, and justifiably so.
Bringing up a bit from my interview with Puppy-chan, they said they were horrified and humiliated, and that's to be expected, whether trans or not. This is incredibly humiliating to whomever the person is based off of.
After all this, Puppy-chan was tired of it and decided to DM Antoons to try and stop the argument. Made up publicly, but that didn't last long, because not long after, DaftPina made an update on the situation with proof from a friend of Anton threatening to backstab Puppy-chan when they turn 18. Until then, using them to infiltrate the left. Jesus, I'm getting flashbacks. In his response, Antoons said the messages were screenshot unfairly, saying they were before the two made up, even though it really looks like the messages were sent afterwards. But anyway, we're getting way ahead of ourselves. As you're probably already aware, a little over a week before this update, Daft Pina made a video called Antoons, Racist Tracer, and where he accuses Antoons of being a, well, racist tracer. As always, Daft made a pretty good video, and if for some reason you haven't watched it yet, I really suggest you do. The video digs into Antoons, showing how he directs hate to certain groups of people, as well as how he regularly traces. His defense for tracing during the interview Daft did is that it's not that big of a deal, and other people do it, so why can't he? I'm not going to pretend I know much about art, all I know is that it takes a lot of time and skill, and tracing is a very big deal in the art community, as it is just taking someone's artwork, saying, I made this, and in the case of Antoons, making a lot of money in the process. Another defense he gives is that he's trying to get as close to the original as possible to make it recognizable. Daft asked if he tried to draw himself first, and Antoons replies,
Because, again, I wanted to have the same type of style as the original.
The video came in the middle of the Puppy-chan drama and doesn't touch on it all too much, rather how he took his political commentary a little bit too far. Now, I do want to say I have nothing wrong with political commentary. I do, however, have a problem with people who go as far as possible to shock people for attention, something Antoons admits to doing. It seems to have started with the aforementioned satirization of the 2020 BLM protests, but it starts to get a bit dodgy when he starts quote-unquote satirizing specific groups of people and not just protests. The list Daft Pina provides include
Women people, black people, LGBT people, Jewish people, European people, and furry people.
I don't hate edgy humor, in fact I really enjoy it, but while Antoons claims everything he does is a joke, it may go a little bit further than that. Take for example Mr. Pumpkinface, another political cartoonist similar to Antoons who he's publicly friends with and associates with. Due to that and the similarity of their comics, he likely shares at least a partial Twitter audience with him. He ran a poll in 2019 entitled Are You Against Trans Rights, with the large majority of his audience voting yes. Now again, this could just be an edgy joke, but looking in the comments, it's starting to look doubtful. Back to Anton, a common joke is the references to the attempted suicide rate of trans people. Now, bear in mind, I'm not trans, and there are trans people who find this humor funny. I could very well just be getting offended on other people's behalf, and if so, that's fair. Anton tells Daft that his beliefs in real life are different to the ones he portrays online.
For trans women, would you use their preferred pronouns? She, her?
For sure, yeah.
And their name and everything?
Why not? I mean, of course, as a respectful person.
But as we've seen with Puppy-chan, he doesn't have a problem with lying to people directly in order to paint himself in a bad light. He may be telling the truth there, but it's something to think about. Usually when a commentary video on a specific person does particularly well, other people in the community tend to make videos to help spread the word and give their own opinion. Not that that's a bad thing, I mean that's exactly what I'm doing right now. I've already mentioned Justab's initial video, but he definitely wasn't the only one. Antoons started facing a lot of backlash and went about getting rid of it in the worst ways possible, one being forcibly copyright striking videos down.
So Antoons copyright striked my video and made a bunch of false accusations against me.
Now, false flagging is incredibly scummy, but so is calling someone a pedophile because they're asexual and because they support the entire LGBT community.
Calls them a map out of nowhere. You might be wondering how he got to such a conclusion. First, he said it was because he got a tip from an anonymous source, in which case he did no fact-checking. He then further elaborated when I asked him about it in our interview, saying, I was told she defends all LGBT groups, which includes maps.
He did both of these to a YouTuber by the name of Izzy's, and as far as I'm aware, the first video is yet to be reinstated, and a different video she made in Antoons talking about, among other things, how she got flagged is age restricted. At this point, the backlash was clearly gangsome, and eventually felt the need to make a 30-minute response to Daft Pina with the subtitle "Failed Artist Desperate for Drama." I should say it wasn't the best, as well as rather controversial, with an almost 50% like to dislike ratio at the time of recording. I mean, ignoring the actual contents of the video, his slow voice makes the 30-minute video really hard to sit through. I know that's a bit nitpicky, but if you're gonna watch it for yourself, which I suggest you do, so I can prove I'm not taking stuff out of context, watch it in at least 1.5 times speed for your own sanity. But enough being unnecessarily mean, let's actually take a look at the video. The first point I want to bring up is that he has a black-colored character called Mr. Sneaks. Anton used Mr. Sneaks to portray various negative stereotypes associated with black people. And due to his history of jokes poking fun of minority groups, people understandably thought Mr. Sneaks was used to represent black people. To rebut this, he essentially just says, "No you," using the excuse that Mr. Sneaks isn't human, and if you see him as basically a black stereotype, then maybe you're the racist one.
But Mr. Sneaks is not meant to represent black people at all. He may have dated a black woman and dressed in hip-hop styled clothing sometimes, but he is still very much not a human, and therefore not a representation of the black community. If you're thinking that black-colored characters are the only people who date black women and wear hip-hop-like clothing, what do you think that says about how you view black people?
That's ignoring the fact that in the Antoons universe, Mr. Freaks is seen as a black person. In this comic, you see him using Black Lives Matter to have sex with someone. In this, you see Mr. Freaks, Mr. Sneaks' white-collared counterpart, covering himself in oil in order to take money from people in the name of Black Lives Matter. Completely ignoring the fact that black-colored characters are clearly meant to be seen as black people in this universe, it's undeniable that Mr. Sneaks is deliberately racially coded. Antoons also used the point that he ran an ad for his Mr. Freaks plush with the tagline "Plush Toys Matter," a clear joke on Black Lives Matter, but how does that help his case in any way?
Oh, and here's a tweet explicitly saying Mr. Sneaks is black. Oops, Anton, I think you left out a little context for someone who cares so much about it.
Oh yeah, that as well. Anton then tries to claim Daft cherry-picked comics in order to paint him in a worse light, saying firstly there is an actual black character in Antoons' put in a comic, and said Daft didn't show that, except, you know, he did. He also tries claiming there are examples where he portrays trans people in a positive light, although he flashes the examples of comics on screen fairly quickly, so I took the time to pause and read them. And if he was intending to portray trans people well, all I'm saying is he could have done it a little bit better. The first one shows Mr. Freaks going on a date with a woman. He's having a great time until, oh, penis. Also, I'm not saying you have to be attracted to trans people. It's perfectly fine to have a preference, but this just seems like not the best way to portray that. The second one is fine as far as I can tell, but then you get to the last one, which shows someone getting offended over a joke and speaking over a trans person who doesn't actually care. The only issue I really have is Anton portrays this trans woman as having clearly masculine features. I've seen a lot of transphobic rhetoric that's just saying they don't even look like women. All I'm saying is he could have given a more subtle indicator that she was trans, like the trans flag colored teapot in the second comic. Although, again, maybe I'm just getting offended with people like the guy in the third comic. Although trans people have said the way he treats and picks trans people is, quote, horrendous. He then literally says I have people in my game who are gay and trans, so I'm not homophobic or transphobic. I mean, I don't think there's much to say here. He basically just said I have a black friend, I can't be racist, but for LGBT people. For pretty much the rest of the video, he focuses on the tracing part, including bringing up the fact that Daft Pina used to trace his drawings, except Daft hasn't traced in years and regularly traces it. The last time he traced was when he was a teenager. Antoon still traces very regularly. Anton's favourite argument is that other people trace in parodies, so it's fine if he does so. One of the people he uses as an example of tracing is one of Daft Pina's friends, Meat Canyon.
Despite Meat Canyon being a collective of artists, Anton tries to point out Daft's hypocrisy in not showing this in his video with Meat Canyon. That could be because the last trace was from 7 months ago, it was one of Meat Canyon's artists that had possibly been fired now, or Daft just spoke to him privately.
He then goes on a rant basically just showing other people tracing before going back to the Puppy Chan drama. He tries to claim things like Puppy Chan refused to retweet his tweet announcing their agreement, but the DM screenshot he provides on screen doesn't prove that, instead shows PuppyChan telling Anton to tweet the agreement. He then brings up the screenshots of him saying he plans to backstab PuppyChan. He claims the screenshots are out of context and the conversation happened before the agreement, but I'm gonna be real, it's hard to say this happened before when he explicitly says PuppyChan apologized and took all responsibility regarding harassment, which only happened during that DM conversation. He then makes a frankly very stupid argument trying to justify animating PuppyChan showing period blood. Now, I'm gonna reiterate, it's clear Anton wasn't sexualizing PuppyChan, but nonetheless, animating a minor showing period blood is still pretty weird, even if it's censored.
Who is this minor we are talking about here? PuppyChan the human or PuppyChan the fictional cartoon dog? Looking at the online age converter, 17 in dog years is actually 159 in human years.
Really? As far as I can tell, PuppyChan's dog character is supposed to represent them. He brings up the fact that people misconstrue Mr. Freaks as meant to represent him, which he isn't. Although, the reason people probably think that is because a lot of the time the main character someone uses is usually meant to represent them, just like PuppyChan. I skimmed over the video a bit, but that's mainly because he was either reiterating points or I just didn't feel like they needed disputing. That's not me saying the points he brought up were valid, by the way, because they won. Once again, I'd suggest watching the video yourself to decide whether you think his arguments were valid or not. Antoons didn't stop there though, as people continue making videos, he continued giving people reasons to, whether it's for attention or he's just really interested in pushing free speech, although it's probably for attention. In which case, I guess you're welcome, Anton. Now, granted, there are other people who make videos on people whenever they breathe, but I'd say some of the reasons were fairly justified, like the infamous Butch Hartman commission. If you somehow don't know who he is, Butch Hartman is, or should I say was, a fairly beloved animator. He's famous for being behind shows like Danny Phantom, The Fairly Odd Parents, Tough Puppy, and the other one. Although he's sort of fallen from grace a bit since basically scamming people with a GoFundMe for a streaming service that never came out, claiming autism could be cured by praying, and other kind of not so good things. There are videos about him if you want to know more. What I'm trying to say is people don't really like him, but that doesn't justify essentially slandering him. He's also now stuck selling commissions for $200, which is relevant, I promise. On April Fool's Day of this year, Antoons posted a commission he got from Butch Hartman in where Mr. Freaks was holding a burning trans flag. Turns out the commission was just Mr. Freaks holding a burning white flag, which Anton colored himself. Again, Butch isn't the greatest guy, but painting him as someone who's willing to draw a trans flag burning is pretty scummy, if you ask me. Oh yeah, and I almost completely forgot to mention he drew softcore child porn.
Today I want to discuss Antoons drawing literal porn of me.
I know he's a polarizing figure, but regardless of your opinions on HarleyTBS, this is an objectively gross and in some places illegal thing to do. The picture is of 33-year-old Anton, not Mr. Freaks, but this character, who Anton explicitly said was a depiction of him, spanking 16-year-old HarleyTBS's bare ass with a belt. His and his fans' argument is that parents spank their kids all the time, and this is what this is depicting. Nothing sexual. Except, 1, Anton is a random man from the internet, not Harley's dad, and 2, the picture of HarleyTBS is a redraw of the same picture, but instead with Just Stop. The difference is the picture with Just Stop also had the added context of Anton walking up to him in his underwear. Just Stop was also 16 at the time. Oh, and Anton also said Just Stop unsolicited porn.
I keep mentioning the fact that I'm a minor, as during our talks Anton sent me porn to prove a point of his. Keeping in mind I never asked to see it and that he acknowledged my age multiple times, I wonder why people think he might be a map, as what he did was highly illegal.
Now, yeah, again, I'll reiterate, I don't think he was sexualizing PuppyChan, but it's kinda hard to say the same thing for Harley and Just Stop. I still wouldn't say he's a pedophile, which is an allegation people throw around way too much these days. From what I can tell, he's just someone who likes shock value a bit too much, but I don't know, if every other example I've put forward today doesn't faze you, I'm really hoping him drawing softcore CP makes you at the very least a bit more suspicious of him and his intentions. Whatever your opinion is on Antoons, it's clear that he's not the nicest person, and as you can probably tell, I'm personally not the biggest fan. But if after this you still like him, that's fine. There's quite a lot to cover with Anton, and I very likely missed something, so if I have, let me know and I'll be sure to make a pinned comment. With videos like this that are probably going to be controversial, your comment might get auto-deleted if it's too mean or whatever. I have never and will never delete comments, so if that happens, please just try again. Anyway, if you enjoyed this video, please leave a like and subscribe, consider following me on Twitter and joining my Discord server, and with that being said, I'll see you next time.